Before I get into these stories, I want to say something. Every single person who submitted these stories said the same thing when they were done writing. They all said, "I still think about this." Not sometimes, not occasionally, all the time. Every time I walk through my front door, every time I go to bed, every time I am in the house alone. Because there is a specific kind of fear that never fully goes away. And it is not the fear of dark places or horror movies or things that go bump in the night. It is the fear of realizing that the place you felt most safe, your own home, the four walls you come back to every single day, was never as safe as you thought. These are 3 stories from 3 different people. They all start the same way, ordinary, completely ordinary, and they all end with the same realization. They were never really alone. I want to start by saying that I am not the kind of person who scares easily. I grew up in a big family in a loud house. 6 kids, 2 parents, a dog that barked at everything. Privacy was something you dreamed about but never actually got. So when I finally moved into my own apartment at 24, a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building in a quiet part of the city, I was not scared to be alone. I was relieved. I had been living there for about 8 months when it started. And when I say it started, I mean it started small. So small that for the first few weeks, I genuinely did not notice. Or I noticed and explained it away, which is what we all do. Because the human brain is very good at finding explanations for things that don't have them. The first thing I noticed was the coffee. I drink 1 cup of coffee in the morning, always have. 1 cup, made in my little 4-cup machine, drunk at the kitchen table while I look at my phone. The rest of the pot goes cold and I pour it out when I get home from work. That was my routine, exact every day for 8 months. Sometime in September, I came home from work and went to pour out the leftover coffee before cooking dinner, and the pot was empty. I stood there for a second looking at it, thought maybe I had already poured it out before I left that morning. Couldn't remember doing it, but maybe I had. I have a 45-minute commute and mornings are a blur. I shrugged it off and cooked dinner. 2 days later, it happened again. Came home, went to pour out the coffee, and the pot was empty, rinsed and sitting in the drying rack next to the sink. Now I paused a little longer, because I definitely did not do that before I left. I know my morning routine well enough to know that rinsing the coffee pot is not part of it. I leave that for the evening, always. I checked the door, locked. Windows in the kitchen, locked. Nothing out of place, nothing missing. I lived on the 3rd floor, so the windows were not exactly easy access points anyway. I went to bed that night thinking I was losing my mind. Or maybe I had done it without thinking. Or maybe my upstairs neighbor had some kind of impossible access to my kitchen that I wasn't aware of. All of these things were more plausible to me than the actual answer, because I did not want to think about the actual answer. The coffee thing kept happening. Not every day, maybe twice a week. I started paying close attention to the pot when I left in the morning. I would actually say out loud to myself, "Okay, you are leaving the coffee in the pot, you are not pouring it out, remember this." And I would come home, and it would be empty and rinsed and in the drying rack. My sister told me I should call a locksmith and get the locks changed. I said that seemed extreme. She said she thought I was being extremely not extreme about a situation that warranted it. I laughed it off. I still could not make myself believe that someone was getting into my apartment, my 3rd floor apartment, with the locked door and the locked windows. Instead, I bought a little notebook and started writing down every time it happened. Date, time I left, state of the coffee pot. October had 6 entries. November had 8. In November, I also added a new entry type, disturbed items, because by November, it was not just the coffee pot. In November, things started being moved. Not dramatically, not in a way that you would walk into the room and immediately know something was wrong. Subtly. My books shifted on the shelf. Not all of them, just 1 or 2, pushed back slightly so they sat a 1/4 inch behind the others. A chair at my kitchen table at a slightly different angle than I had left it. A throw pillow from my couch on the floor when I came home, just the once, like it had fallen or been placed there. I want you to understand something about these details. What made them disturbing was not that they were dramatic, it was that they were so specific. A 1/4 inch, a slightly different angle, the kind of adjustments that a person makes when they want to be present in a space but not be noticed. I was being careful, deliberate, not random, not accidental. Every change was small enough that I might have missed it, small enough that I could dismiss it as my own forgetfulness. But I was not forgetful. I was a 24-year-old woman who lived alone and had developed, in the process of living alone, a very precise awareness of her own space. Because when you are the only person in the space, you notice when things are different. You notice the quarter inch. You notice the angle of the chair. In December, I bought a camera, a cheap one, the kind you can get online for $30 that records to a little SD card. I put it on my bookshelf facing the main living area, pointed so we could see the kitchen entrance and the hallway to the bedroom. I positioned one of my books in front of part of it so it was not obvious. The first week of December, nothing. The coffee still disappeared, but the camera footage showed nothing in the main living area. I started to think that maybe whatever was happening was limited to the kitchen, and maybe I should get a second camera. I did not get a second camera fast enough. December 14th, I came home from work at my usual time, around 6:15. Nothing seemed out of place. I cooked dinner, I watched some TV, I went to bed at around 11. Normal evening. Nothing unusual. I checked the camera footage the next morning, and for a few seconds I could not process what I was seeing. At 2:17 in the morning, while I was asleep in my bedroom, a man walked out of my kitchen and stood in my hallway. He was tall. Dark clothing. He stood in the hallway for exactly 40 seconds without moving. Just standing there, facing my bedroom door. And then he walked back into the kitchen. I watched this footage sitting at my kitchen table in the morning eating the breakfast I had just made, in the same kitchen this man had been standing in 7 hours earlier. I watched it 4 times before I could make myself do anything. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. He was not coming in from outside. He walked out of my kitchen and then went back into it. He had been inside the apartment. He had been inside my apartment while I was asleep, and he had stood in the hallway outside my bedroom door for 40 seconds, and then he had gone back wherever he came from. I called the police. They came within 20 minutes. 2 officers. I showed them the footage and watched their faces change. They searched the apartment top to bottom. They found it in the kitchen. There was a panel in the back of one of my lower cabinets. Behind the cabinet, behind the panel, was a space, a utility crawl space that ran between my apartment and the one next to mine. It was not supposed to be accessible. At some point, the panel had been removed from the inside, from the crawl space, and replaced so it looked intact from my side. My neighbor, the one whose apartment shared that wall, had moved out in August, 1 month before the coffee started disappearing. The apartment had not been re-rented. It had been sitting empty. But the building manager confirmed that the keys to the empty unit had gone missing from the office in September. They never found who it was. The police took the footage, took prints from the crawl space, ran everything through the system. Nothing came back. Whoever had been living in that empty apartment next to mine, coming through the panel in my kitchen cabinet while I slept, drinking my coffee and moving my things, they were never identified. I moved out the next day. I stayed with my sister for 3 months. I still check my cabinets before I go to sleep every night, even now, even in a completely different building. I still wake up at 2 a.m. sometimes and lie there in the dark listening. I do not drink coffee anymore. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I cannot smell it without thinking about what it meant. All those mornings I made a pot, all those nights I came home to an empty one. He was drinking my coffee every morning in my kitchen while I was at work, and I thanked him for it by never noticing until December. I have debated whether to share this for 2 years. I am sharing it now because I found out recently that what happened to me happened to someone else in the same neighborhood, and I think people need to know what to look for. My name does not matter. I am a 31-year-old man. I live alone in a house I bought 3 years ago. A small 2-bedroom in a suburb about 25 miles outside of a mid-sized city. Quiet street, good neighbors. The kind of neighborhood where people wave from their driveways and leave cookies on your porch at Christmas. The kind of neighborhood where the last thing anyone expects is what I am about to describe. I want to be clear about something before I start. What happened to me was not dramatic. It was not loud or violent or sudden. It was slow. It was methodical. And the reason it lasted as long as it did, 14 months, which I will get to, is because it was designed to look like nothing. It started with my electric bill. In January of 2 years ago, I got my electric bill, and it was about $30 higher than usual. January is cold, so I figured I had just been running the heat more than I realized. In February, it was $40 higher than the previous February. In March, $60. I called the electric company. They sent someone to check the meter. The meter was fine. The usage was real. My house was genuinely consuming that much more electricity than it had the year before. The technician asked if I had bought any new appliances or added any electronics. I said no. He shrugged and left. In April, I started going through the house systematically. I was going to figure out what was pulling extra electricity. I checked the basement first. Water heater, furnace, both fine. I checked the garage, nothing new. I walked around the main floor unplugging things I wasn't using. Still high. I went upstairs. I have 2 bedrooms. I use one as my bedroom and one as a home office. The office has my desktop computer and a monitor and a printer, and not much else. When I opened the door to the office in April, everything looked exactly as I always left it. But it smelled different. It is very hard to explain exactly what I mean by that. My office has a specific smell. The smell of my computer equipment, the faint smell of paper from the printer, that slightly dry air smell of a room that is used mainly for work and not slept in. It smells like a workplace. It always has. In April, it smelled faintly like something else. I stood in the doorway sniffing like an idiot for a full minute, trying to identify it. Food. It smelled faintly, almost undetectably, like food. Like someone had eaten something in there recently. I told myself the smell was coming from the hallway, or the kitchen below, coming up through the vent. I closed the door and went back downstairs. But I kept thinking about the electricity. And in May, I pulled my bills from the previous year and made a chart. The increase had started 11 months ago, not in January. 11 months ago, in the spring of the previous year. I tried to think about what had changed 11 months ago, and I remembered. 11 months ago, I had gone on vacation for 2 weeks. My first real vacation in years. 2 weeks in Portugal. I had left the house locked and empty, and come back tanned and relaxed and happy. Or I had thought it was empty. I went back to the office in May, and I stood in the doorway for a long time. And then I looked up. My house is old. Older houses have attic access hatches in various rooms. My office had one. A small square hatch in the ceiling near the far wall, about 2 feet by 2 feet, painted white to match the ceiling. I had never opened it. It was just there, the way those things are in old houses, not something you think about. The paint around the edges of the hatch was cracked. Not all the way around, just on one side, like something had pushed it up repeatedly from above, and the paint at the seam had slowly cracked from the repeated pressure. I got a ladder from the garage. I am not going to describe what I found in the attic in great detail because I still cannot think about it without feeling sick, but I will tell you the relevant facts. There was a sleeping area, a camping mat, a sleeping bag, both relatively new, a battery-powered lantern, a small collection of food, canned goods, protein bars, bottles of water, an extension cord that ran from the attic down through a small gap at the back of the office wall and into one of my office outlets. That was where the electricity was going. There were 14 months of entries in a small notebook, handwritten, dates and what sounded like observations, weather, notes about the neighborhood, notes about me, my schedule, when I left in the morning, when I came back, when I had people over and their descriptions, the make and model of my car, my typical grocery shopping day, the route I took when I went for evening runs. 14 months. Whoever this was had been in my attic for 14 months. The police came. The attic was empty by then. I had not gone up there. I had come back downstairs the moment I saw what was there and called 911 from the front porch. By the time they searched it, whoever had been living up there was gone. They took the notebook, the mat, the lantern, everything. They identified one fingerprint. It came back to a man who had no criminal record, no registered address, and no digital footprint of any kind. He had no driver's license, no social security filings after a certain point, no credit history. It was as if he had simply stopped existing on paper a number of years ago. They never found him. What I know is this. He had been in my attic since the previous spring. He had been there through 2 winters and a summer. He had watched me come and go every day for over a year. He had been 10 feet above my head while I worked at my desk, while I slept in the next room, while I watched TV and cooked dinner and called my mother and lived what I thought was my private life. And he had done it quietly enough, carefully enough, that I never noticed. Not once. Not for 14 months. The man they identified had last been seen in a neighborhood 2 miles from mine. A woman there had complained to police about her electric bill being unusually high. The complaint was from 18 months before he showed up in my attic. I do not know how long he had been in her attic before hers. I do not know how many houses there were before that. I do not know where he is now. I had the attic hatch sealed and bolted from below. I had every entry point to the attic checked and sealed. I installed a camera in the office pointing directly at the ceiling. I check my electric bill every single month against the same month of the previous year, and if it is ever more than $10 different, I call the police first and look for reasons second. This is the hardest one for me to write about, not because it was the most dangerous, though it was, because of how it ended, because of the detail that I think about every single night before I go to sleep. She said goodnight to me. Let me start from the beginning. I am 28 years old. At the time this happened, I was 26, living alone in a small town. A proper small town, population under 2,000, the kind of place where you know your neighbors and leave your car unlocked and feel stupid for being nervous about anything because nothing ever happens here. I had moved there for a job that did not work out and then stayed because I liked the quiet. I had a 2-bedroom house with a small yard and a detached garage, and I paid less for it in rent than I had paid for a studio apartment in the city I moved from. I was content. I was maybe the most settled and comfortable I had ever been in my adult life. The house had belonged to an older woman before I rented it. The landlord told me she had lived there for many years and had eventually moved into a care facility. Some of her furniture was still in the house. The landlord had said I could use it or put it in storage, whatever I preferred. I liked most of it. It was old and solid and had the comfortable feel of furniture that has been well used. I left it where it was and moved my own things around it. There was a rocking chair in the 2nd bedroom. Old, dark wood, a little worn on the armrests. I had no furniture of my own for that room. I used it as a kind of storage space, so the rocking chair stayed there. I would see it sometimes when I passed the open door on my way to the bathroom, just sitting there in the corner. It never bothered me. For the first 6 months, everything was fine. In the 7th month, I started sleeping badly. Not couldn't fall asleep bad, more like kept waking up bad. I would fall asleep fine and then wake at odd hours and lie there for a while before falling back under. I put it down to the new job stress and a bad period in general and did not think too much about it. But one night in March, I woke up at around 2 a.m. and the house felt different. I cannot explain that better than that. It felt different. The quality of the silence was different, if that makes any sense. Like the difference between an empty room and a room with someone standing very still in it. both silent, but not the same. I lay there for a while, not moving, just listening. I could hear nothing. The house was quiet. Outside the window, I could hear the normal small-town nighttime sounds, a dog far away, wind in the trees, nothing that should have felt wrong. And then I heard the rocking chair. It was unmistakable, that slow, rhythmic creak of a rocking chair in motion. Back and forth, coming from the second bedroom. I want to tell you that I immediately grabbed my phone and called the police. I did not. What I did was lie completely still in my bed for what felt like a very long time, but was probably about 4 minutes, listening to the rocking chair move back and forth and trying to find an explanation. Wind. Could wind move a rocking chair? Maybe, if the window was open, but I had closed all the windows before bed because it was cold. Could the house settling make that sound? I had lived there for 7 months, and the house had never made that sound. Could I be dreaming? I pressed my fingernails into my palm and felt it clearly. Not dreaming. The rocking stopped. And then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate, coming from the second bedroom doorway and moving toward my room. Not trying to be quiet, just walking, like someone who lived there. Like someone who had every right to be in that hallway at 2 a.m. The footsteps stopped outside my bedroom door. I want to describe what that felt like, lying in your bed in the dark, in the house you have lived in for 7 months and thought of as safe, listening to footsteps stop outside your door. The door handle did not move. There was no knock, just silence. For maybe 30 seconds, there was complete silence. And then a voice, a woman's voice, old, soft, right outside my door. She said, "Good night, dear." And then footsteps again, moving away from the door, back down the hallway, back into the second bedroom. And then silence. I did not sleep again that night. I lay in my bed with every muscle in my body rigid and my phone in my hand with 911 already dialed, my thumb hovering over the call button, and I did not make a sound, and I did not move until the sun came up. In the morning, I called the police. A single officer came. Small town, remember? Single officer for a call like this at 9 a.m. when everything is quiet. He was polite, and he searched the house, and he found nothing, and he was very gentle about suggesting that I might have been dreaming. I said I understood. I thanked him. That evening, I called my landlord. I told him what had happened. There was a pause on his end of the line. A long pause. And then he said, and these are his exact words. I have them written down because I knew immediately that I would need to remember them exactly. He said, "She came back?" I said, "I'm sorry?" He said, "Mrs. Alderman. She used to rock in that chair at night. She said it helped her sleep. I'm sorry, I should have told you about her. She passed away in the care facility about 3 weeks after you moved in." 3 weeks? She had passed away 3 weeks after I moved in, and I had been living in her house for 7 months. I said, "Where was her bedroom?" He told me. It was the second bedroom, the one with the rocking chair. That had been her room for many years, the room she had lived in and slept in and rocked herself to sleep in every night. Now, I am not here to tell you what I believe or what I don't believe. I am not here to tell you it was definitely a ghost, or definitely a living person, or definitely a dream. I do not know what it was. The police found no one. The doors and windows were all locked from the inside. There were no signs of entry. What I do know is that a voice said goodnight to me outside my bedroom door at 2 a.m. A woman's voice, soft and old and completely calm, like someone who had lived in that house for decades and knew exactly where my bedroom was. And here is the detail I think about every night.
It was not frightening, the voice. In the moment, I was terrified, yes, but the voice itself was not frightening. It was kind, the way you might say goodnight to someone you cared about. Familiar. Gentle. Like I said, I still think about it every night. Whether she was real or not, whether she was there or not, she said goodnight to me. And I think that is either the most comforting thing in any of these stories or the most disturbing. I have not yet decided which.
Those were 3 stories from 3 different houses, 3 different experiences of realizing that the place they thought of as their own private space had been shared with someone or something they never agreed to share it with. If you take anything from tonight, let it be this. Check your attic, check your cabinets, know what your electric bill is supposed to look like, and if something feels different about your house, the smell, the sound, the way the silence sits, trust that feeling. Your instincts are smarter than your explanations. If you have a story like one of these, something that happened in your home, something you have been sitting on because you were not sure anyone would believe you, send it to me. The link is in the description. I read every single one. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed tonight's video, a like helps more people find these stories. Subscribe if you are new. And if you are watching this alone, at night, in your house, I hope you checked those cabinets before you sat down. Sleep well.